May I have your attention? May I have your attention? My name is Donald T. Lopez, Mayor of the Village of Los Ranchos de Albuquerque. I want to welcome everyone to the Reconvene meeting, Monday, August 15th, 2022 at 6:01 p.m. Would you please stand and rise to help me do the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, I will call the roll. Mayor Pro Tem Trustee Pacheco.
Here.
Trustee Benavides.
Here.
Trustee Lewis.
Here.
Trustee Radnovich.
Here.
On Wednesday, August 10th, 2022, the Board of Trustees voted to reconvene the Board of Trustee meeting to today, Monday, August 15, 2022, to consider all remaining unheard items of business on the agenda. General public comment will not be allowed, as that occurred on Wednesday, August 10th. Therefore, we will begin at 11, new business item C. Item C is discussion and approval of resolution number 2022-08-02, a resolution imposing a moratorium on pilot project and conservation development standards permit applications. Attorney Nan Winter.
Trustees.
No.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you. Mayor, trustees, I'm presenting this moratorium. This was probably the last resolution drafted by Tiffany Justice. So she and I worked on this together. I want to open with some preparatory comments on the legal efficacy of moratoriums. So generally speaking, a moratorium is more likely to be upheld and less likely to be a compensable taking if it is of a limited duration and relates to an important purpose, that is health, safety, and welfare, and environmental issues, but also comprehensive planning. Despite that fact, a moratorium does have a high risk of generating litigation. So with that, I'll get into what this moratorium actually does. So this is a resolution imposing a moratorium on the pilot project and conservation development standards permit applications. As you know, the village adopted ordinance number 284 on March 9th, 2022, a relatively new ordinance. That ordinance amended portions of the zoning ordinance and adopted a pilot project program allowing for up to 3 conservation development projects. This is a new section 27 in your ordinances. As noted in ordinance 284, it was the desire of the village to provide alternative housing options such as conservation development, which formerly was known as cluster housing. Cluster housing and conservation development was supported in the 2035 master plan in section 8.1.2, residential development, policy B, action steps. The pilot project set out in ordinance 284 was intended to allow for testing and revision as necessary, hence pilot project. And the board determined that the revisions to the new section 9.2.27 conservation development standards permit and related land use sections was necessary. It is anticipated that revisions to the zoning ordinance will now be available for review and action by the Board of Trustees in September of 2022. As you know, the village has accepted one pilot project, and that project has raised certain concerns relative to variances, the number of variances, and what's actually called for as a result of the new 9.2.27. This ordinance determines that it is in the best interest of all parties that the village temporarily halt acceptance of pilot project applications until revisions to 9.2.27 are implemented. So with that, Mayor, I would turn it over back to you.
Thank you, Attorney Winter. At this time, I'm going to entertain a motion and a second. Then we'll get into discussion from the governing body individually. And then we will ask for comments from both written comments and comments from the audience pertaining directly to item 11C. I need a motion to approve resolution number 2022-08-02.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 2022-08-02, a resolution imposing a moratorium on pilot projects and Conservation Development Standard permit applications. I'd like to make that motion with the following amendments. First of all, I'd like to extend the moratorium to November 30th, 2022 from September 30th, 2022. Second amendment would be include all pilot project concepts currently before us and any applications that may be submitted during the moratorium. Number 3, upon the conclusion of our master plan review workshop in early September, if it is determined at that time that pilot projects were indeed the directive of the master plan and the people that put it together, then the mayor and the village staff shall convene a small group of village residents and some planning and zoning commissioners to study the pilot project ordinance number 284 and present any modifications to the Board of Trustees for consideration.
Thank you, Trustee Lewis. I need a second. Lacking a second, the motion will die. Attorney Winter, without a second, the motion dies, correct? Okay. Being no second, the motion dies. Am I correct, Attorney Winter, that we can no longer discuss item 11C?
No.
Well, no. Answer my question. Wait a minute. Answer my question.
Mayor, you'll just have to solicit another motion.
Okay, that answers my question. I need a motion to approve item 11C.
Motion to approve item 11C.
I need a second.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. Now I get to discussion from the governing body. I'm going to start with Mayor Pro Tem Trustee Pacheco. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. This has been a difficult process, and I have to say, you know, the whole point of this ordinance was to allow developers to bring us projects, some that maybe we never heard before, some that maybe were outside the box. And again, that's why it was called a pilot project. During the master planning meetings, we had dialogue, a lot of dialogue during the master plan meetings where those that were in attendance supported this. You know, a lot of people that are here tonight were not at those meetings, and some were. And this
Please
ordinance.
allow the Mayor Pro Tem to speak. Everybody in the audience is going to get a chance to talk tonight if that's what you want to do. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
We cannot forget that the master plan encourages developers to come to us with items that maybe we hadn't seen before and items that maybe we wouldn't think of. And I honestly feel like developers will bring us innovative ideas. I think they're gonna.
Please, please, please. You will get a chance to give your comments at the appropriate time. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
These ideas and our vote is not the approval of the pilot project. And I don't know that a lot of people understand that. This is the approval to start the process. And there's still a lot of time between now and the time that a pilot project would begin. So I have a hard time with it. I also feel that, you know, that we're putting ourselves, we're putting the village, we're going to have a lot of exposure in terms of litigation. I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable putting the village in a position where this could turn into a lot of money. And I'm not comfortable with that. Again, to me, the purpose of the pilot project ordinance is to set the parameters of the pilot project. I'm interested in hearing what the developers do bring to us. You know, it's not, maybe we're not going to agree on everything, but I would love to hear the innovative ideas that these developers are going to bring to us. so that we can determine if it's something that we want for our village. It might change, during the process. The parameters may change. We don't know that until we hear it, and we have not heard it yet. We heard the first project. They came to us. I know that they've met with you. I'm sure they're still talking to people. I don't know what that project's going to end up looking like, and we're not going to know that until November. So, Mayor, I just have a really hard time supporting a moratorium across the board to shut down the pilot projects. Thank you.
Trustee Benavides. Trustee Benavides.
So I think that the pilot project is being judged by the one application that we had in front of us, which did not meet the ordinance. And so I'm wanting to give the applicant another opportunity to meet the ordinance. And then we can judge whether we like this pilot project, or we rather say, you know what, you now have an opportunity to do what else you are allowed to do with A1, and you might not like that better. And I have no idea what's in their heads. So I know people just want the applicant to donate, the 9 acres to the village. I doubt if that's going to happen. You can ask. So yes, I think we need to work on the ordinance. Give us a chance to do that, and give the applicant a chance to show you a better application.
Thank you. Trustee Lewis.
I agree with what both of you said. I think we've lost sight that this is just the first step, and that is to bring us the concepts so that we can see what is out there and what creative things that developers will bring. Some of them will be completely out of line, and they'll never even come to the light of day. Unfortunately, this all started because a rumor was spread out there that the meeting in June was going to be the final approval of the project, and that wasn't the case at all. Please. Anyway, I'm supportive of that because I think when we have our master plan review session, it's going to show us that, and I was in some of those meetings, there was a lot of talk and a lot of concern and a lot of emphasis on housing alternatives. So I think we will be back to the board of continuing to try to massage and develop this pilot project program. So I am in agreement with that. I wanted to continue the dialogue through the form of a moratorium. Whether it's fair or not, I don't know. But I think we have to continue to keep the dialogue because that was the direction that was given to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Radnovich.
I have more questions than I do comments at this point. And I have some questions for our village attorney, for one. Now, is now the time that I can ask those questions?
Absolutely. That's what this is for.
So, Nan, what are the liabilities of the village if we decide to approve a moratorium for the pilot project? And let me add one other thing. As I read the actual code last night, I came up with a lot of questions myself, and one of the questions I have is the whole idea of using an FAR to judge whether a conservation development, and I wish we'd quit using the term cluster development because it's not correct. And actually, a conservation development, really the first one we saw was not really the way conservation development was first developed in actually the Midwest about 10 years ago. So what would be our liability of having of actually calling a moratorium?
Mayor, trustee, as mentioned earlier, a moratorium in New Mexico is more likely to be upheld and less likely to result in a compensable taking. So you are essentially depriving somebody who has relied on your language in the ordinance to propose something. Not only to propose something, but potentially to go to P&Z with various approvals, get those approvals, move to the Board of Trustees. Ultimately, a project results in a building permit. The courts in New Mexico, predominantly the Court of Appeals, has really delved into at what point in time a developer's rights vest. And they vest when that developer relies on something you have told him to do. It is absolutely clear from the Court of Appeals decisions that once you issue a building permit, that developer probably has a vested right. Supreme Court is a little more strict on that, but has not issued any case law on that issue in a long time. Now, having said that, a moratorium is more likely to be upheld if it is of a short duration. The cases we found in New Mexico where moratoriums were upheld were anywhere from 4 to 8 months. And they have to be related to a legitimate health, safety, and welfare consideration, environmental consideration. As you'll see in the next resolution, we do have some language in there dealing with traffic investigations. So when I say a developer has vested rights, they could allege a taking, either an eminent, an inverse condemnation type taking. They due process violation, a constitutional taking. But again, New Mexico seems pretty solid that if you keep it short and related to health, safety, and welfare, you're probably in a safe zone.
And one other question. For the first of those pilot projects that we saw, which was heard the night I wasn't able to be here, was because that's already kind of in the track for approval or for not approval. Does that change things in any way in terms of our legal liabilities with that particular project?
Mayor, trustee, that's a tough call. It is in the queue. It's at the very beginning of its process, yes. The very, very beginning of its process. But as I also mentioned at the outset, a moratorium does have a high risk of generating litigation simply because somebody has invested money in a 9-acre facility and may or may not have relied on something the ordinance said, a village staffer told them relative to how it could be used or not used. So it's it depends on the investment and where they perceive they've been wronged. So I can't really opine on that as clearly as you'd probably like.
Just a couple more, if you could bear with me. Another that I have is if we impose a moratorium tonight, just say we did, would that developer then, the developer that we've already gotten a submittal from, would they start the queue all over again, or could they continue and actually have their, I think they deferred till November, I believe. Could they come back in November, adjust their subdivision plan to meet the changes that we potentially make on through the moratorium, and then submit that plan again, or would they be starting at the start of the queue again?
Mayor, trustee, the way this moratorium is written, that the one pending is indeed pending. There is an application pending. This moratorium applies to acceptance of new applications. So technically, most technically, even though the pending application is deferred until November, it is still subject to the ordinance as written.
As written.
As written. Now, could the developer voluntarily comply with the new, assuming you amend 9.2.27? Could the developer voluntarily? He could certainly voluntarily agree to that. I don't see a problem with that at all, but the way this is technically written, no new applications would be accepted under the current existing ordinance, except the one that's pending. So nobody can make application for a pilot project if you pass this ordinance tonight after today, until the moratorium is suspended.
And this may be a question for you or for Ann, I'm not sure. If we impose a moratorium, do we then look at, look at the code as it was written? And do we have that time? For instance, if we go with what Councilor Lewis said and have the moratorium imposed for 3 months, I believe was the time frame. Over that 3-month time period, do we then review or set up a committee to review the current code, and then come back with any potential changes at the end of that 3-month period? Is that the way it works?
Mayor, Trustee, I'll start and then I'll let Ann clean up. The ordinance revisions, there is one draft ordinance revision already in place. And what we realized after receipt of the first application was that the board would be hearing variances. And in the past, or most of your ordinances, variances are heard at P&Z. So again, before Tiffany left, she rewrote the ordinance and took out the board variance process and replaced it with the P&Z variance process. So we already have a redrafted conservation development ordinance that contemplates all the variances going to P&Z in the ordinary course. So there is that draft already. What Trustee Lewis proposed is a little bit a different thing. I think he proposed some public comment, public input, and further amendments to the conservation development ordinance. Ann?
Yes. Good evening, Mayor, Trustee Radnovich, and trustees. Thank you, Nan. I don't have that much further because we don't have a draft proposed new pilot project ordinance to present to you. We have one change, but we were hoping to flesh this out further in the study session on the 8th. And I think at that point, perhaps we could talk about ways to get public input. If it's a committee, if it's a staff recommendation, if it's looking at the FAR versus dwelling units per acre and some of those issues. And by the way, all of those issues were contemplated by the trustees prior to passage of the ordinance.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any further
That answers my question, Mayor.
Okay,
Questions?
thank you. Absolutely, go ahead.
So I think when we drafted it, we knew, this isn't something that the trustees came up with. Again, this was something that was a directive we felt from the master plan. We knew when we took it on and tried to contemplate how it would work, we gave a lot of time and effort to it. But we knew it wasn't a perfect document. And that's why, that's one of the reasons it was specified that there was maybe up to 3 that you could try. And if it didn't work, then that got taken out of our ordinance. And we knew that each one would be an adaptation and an adjustment from the previous one as we learned and went with this. So again, this is a document I think that is made to be massaged and modified and looked at and, and so, yeah, it's going to be something that we'll, continue to discuss. as the biggest intention was to have the door open, to have people bring in all concepts, you know, and that we can then go, oh, I never thought of something like that. That might really work.
Thank you, trustees. Any further questions?
Anyway, yeah, I think that's all my comments. Thank you.
Okay. Now I will have Clerk Cedillo Molina read any submitted written comments first. Danielle, you will have 2 minutes for each submission.
Thank you, Mayor and trustees. Mayor and trustees, yet again, the villagers are coming before you to beg you to listen to us and place an immediate moratorium on all high-density construction in C1 areas in all conservancy pilot programs. This moratorium needs to be for the entire village. I feel that the only way forward to regain any modicum of trust with the residents would be to initiate and complete an all-encompassing study, including traffic congestion, noise pollution, air pollution, and water containment. Needs to be performed for the entire 4th Street corridor. What impact will this have on our 2 fragile schools, Los Ranchos Elementary and Taylor Middle School? As it is, Los Ranchos Elementary only has a proficiency rating of 17% for math and reading, and it is rated number 282 out of 355 schools statewide. Taylor Middle School is at 13% for math proficiency and 25% reading, and it is rated 96 out of 176 schools, citing U.S. News and World Report 2021. How many other students will these projects bring in? No one knows. Can the schools even accommodate these additional students? How are you going to capture and control rainfall when you have taken permeable land and it will become non-permeable? We can see the permeable pavers for the gutter system along 4th Street have failed. The new study needs to take into consideration all of the high-density C1 and pilot conservancy projects that will impact 4th Street. There is no way excluding these other developments and have a realistic study. You have put the cart before the horse with the approvals without an adequate study. The study needs to be completed and thoroughly reviewed by all residents and administration before you make any more disastrous decisions for the village. You do not want this to be your legacy. Drew Tagliapietra, 312 Nuevo Hacienda Lane Northwest. Dear Mayor and trustees, we reside in the Rio Grande Boulevard corridor with the village of Los Ranchos, A1 rural residential zone. We do not live adjacent to the proposed pilot cluster housing project at Guadalupe Trail and Chavez Road, but we are in and will be adversely affected by that project and by any other of the possible 3 high-density developments under Ordinance 284 applied for in Zone A1. If one applies the mandatory language of Ordinance 284 to any parcel within the A1 rural residential zone, the result is lot density only permitted in the R3 or C zones. Clearly unlawful spot zoning attempted by legislation. You propose to put a moratorium on applications under Ordinance 284. Yeah, but the moratorium must include the existing deferred application under that ordinance, and the moratorium must be continued until you can repeal the ordinance. No one can argue with a straight face that imposing via a variance application R3 or C zone density on any A1 neighborhood within the village of Los Ranchos would be unthinkable and would, but for Ordinance 284, be unlawful spot zoning of a small tract within the larger A1 zone area. It is clever the way the drafter of the pilot ordinance thought to use the legislative process to remove 3 pilot projects from the public protection afforded by the quasi-judicial variance process in a way that requires R3/C zone density for any A1 pilot project because of the required mechanical application of the FAR rules to determine lot density. Mayor and trustees, this is quite lengthy and I believe I'm going to run out of time here, so I want to cite The author of this, Bonnie E. and Henry A. Hank Kelly, 6900 Rio Grande Boulevard Northwest, and this will also be entered into the record. I also have a couple other comments that could apply to both 11C and 11D, but I'm going to read them under 11C.
Is it time? Go ahead, Danielle.
To the Mayor of Los Ranchos and trustees, I am a village resident concerned about the high-density development of 4th Street and Osuna and the additional 3 developments in proximity to this intersection. I request a moratorium on all development in the area until a proper traffic study is completed that encompasses the entire area in the village that would be affected by this development. My understanding is that this traffic study is under consideration and is not scheduled to be completed until early 2023. Respectfully, Lori Dubois, 332 Nuevo Hacienda Lane Northwest. Mayor, trustees, and neighbors, a moratorium needs to be put in place until a complete study of traffic, schools, water runoff, pollution, and environmental bombs that will happen when you approve these overwhelming buildings for our village. All projects needs to be stopped, not just south of Osuna, but the total village. As I drive up and down 4th, I cringe each time I see vacant land or a building for sale. Knowing that you would approve a 3-story building on these properties, the village residents are telling you loud and clear that we don't want this type of development in our village. Please listen to us, take that one step with a complete moratorium on high-density building and pilot projects. That will help bring trust back to the residents because now we have none. Danny Tagliapetra, 312 Nuevo Hacienda Lane Northwest. And with that, Mayor and trustees, I turn it back over to you.
Is that it? Thank you. I will now call on the individuals that signed up prior to the meeting wishing to speak only on this matter of business. I will then call anyone else wishing to speak after. You will be allowed 2 minutes and I respectfully ask each of you to adhere to this time. Miss Linda McKee, please come forward. State your name and address for the record.
Okay, Linda McKee. I live at 749 Chavez Road, Northwest. So I too support the moratorium on these pilot projects. I have a few questions, which I know you're not going to answer, but I'm just throwing them out there for you to think about. What's the plan to redraft anything or to take a look at the ordinances that you're going to look at? You're suggesting 46 calendar days, which is 33 working days, excluding weekends and the holiday that's in there. I don't think this is enough time to thoughtfully review, revise, get input to changes in that short period of time. I'd like to understand, I guess I don't really know the extent to which you all are thinking that the revisions, that there are revisions that need to be made. I'd like to understand what criteria will be used to review the regulations. Certainly, as you quote the master plan, we can pull anything we want to out of the master plan as defense for whichever side of the road we happen to be standing on. How will the village include residents in the review? I did hear you say that you will include them. I'd like to understand how. And I'd like to understand if the residents will be given an opportunity to review what you propose before 72 hours before the Board of Trustee meeting where you would then vote on it. Final comment. You made an earlier comment that we need to be here to participate. We've missed some meetings, that's probably true. And I would ask you to make sure that the meeting venue that we have, we asked you this last time, and there's been no change, the meeting venue that we have accommodate everyone who wants to attend these meetings. There's standing room only. It's hard to stand for 3, 4, 5 hours. And ask that you change the venue so we can all participate. Thank you.
Mr. Randy McKee, please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Randy McKee. I live at 749 Chavez Road, Northwest. Please do not start the timer. I would like to correct the record. The point was made just a second ago that Long deferred the consideration of the resolution last, or the project last week. It was not Long that deferred it. I believe Sandra Pacheco deferred it. Long was not here in the meeting, and we still don't understand how that all happened. I'm sure the attorneys will be looking into that one, because we do not believe that was correct action. So let me go ahead and get started. Honorable Mayor and Trustees, good evening. Thank you for your efforts and the contributions of your time to this wonderful village. We do appreciate your service. We do. Thank you for offering this resolution, and we hope for constructive discussions with you that result in amendments. This is the desire of all the villagers who proposed this in their petition opposing the high-density development in this wonderful village. We understand the complexities of this ask, as Nan Renard pointed out some, and we do appreciate your response by way of this resolution. That stated, we encourage you to consider the ask that was made by the over 600 petitioners. We asked for a moratorium to allow time for the village governing board to understand the desires of the entire village regarding high-density development projects and how they might be addressed if the village residents were in opposition. We do not believe that this can be done in the next 30, 60, 90 days as outlined in the resolution. It will take many months to generate an unbiased survey, distribute it, and get the results received, analyze those results through an independent organization that has a solid reputation in these matters, and finally construct a path forward with the villagers based upon those results, everyone participating. Once this is completed, it will require additional time to assess the ordinance for restructuring to get the village back onto track that it has been on for the past 50 years, a path that has served this village extremely well. We ask that you amend your moratorium date to a period of not less than 6 months, with the option to extend it if necessary. What we have is worth preserving, and 50 days does not provide the needed time to assess the impact for this type of development.
Thank you, Mr. McKee. Ms. Camille Vados, please come forward. Are you here? Yes, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Camille Vados, 427 El Paraíso Road, Los Ranchos, New Mexico. You know, when we proposed as a village for a moratorium on the pilot projects or density projects that are overwhelming, it's for the sake of all of us, because all of these, whether it's through the planning and zoning or the board of trustees, there are so many agenda items that need time. And the conservation, whether or not the board of trustees or the planning and zoning commissioners were able to spend the time to look at the pilot project that's proposed for density living or clustered living or alternative living. I don't feel, and I could speak for myself, that I haven't had the time to ponder and to look and to investigate on my own. That is my right. That's all of our rights. And it's overwhelming. We have private lives, as you do, but you have additional times, whether it's through roundtable time or times that you have within the structure here to meet. We don't have the luxury, and I say we, and that's an assumption, but I personally don't have the time. And this village is so beautiful and unique. We are our own municipality. We have the time. We don't need to be spending time on structures that this city of Albuquerque or Rio Rancho.
Thank you,
We
Ms.
are
Wells.
our own
You're out of time,
village.
please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wade Jackson. Please come forward. State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, trustees, Wade Jackson, 6100 Uptown Boulevard, Northeast in Albuquerque. Again, I represent the Friends of Los Ranchos, which supports the moratorium on the pilot project and conservation development permit applications. As I mentioned last week, the Friends represent the interests of more than 650 people who live in the village and sign petitions in support of the moratorium. Those signatories live throughout the village and favor quality, lower density growth consistent with the village's character. I delivered a letter prior to the meeting that outlines a number of issues that makes the pilot project ordinance legally questionable. Not the applications submitted pursuant to that ordinance, but the ordinance itself. The ordinance allows downzoning of properties without sufficient legal justification, which a number of decisions of New Mexico courts have found to be unlawful. Given those legal deficiencies, the most prudent course of action for the village to take would be to enact a moratorium and evaluate those legal issues. There's no reason for the village to incur the cost, both in time and money, of litigating the validity of the ordinance. I understand there may be some legal questions about the moratorium itself as well, but I would speculate that entertaining applications pursuant to that ordinance might generate litigation itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Robert Muhlenweg. Please come forward. State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Mayor, could we get someone to adjust the air conditioning in here? It doesn't seem to be working.
I don't have an answer for you on that. I'm sure it's set to the right temperature. I'm very comfortable. I understand. Okay. We'll see what we can do. Go ahead, sir.
Yes. My name is Robert Muhlenweg. I live at 5645 Rio Grande Boulevard in the village for almost 30 years. I'll try to speak up. I think it's very important to consider some of the legal issues that Mr. Jackson has raised, that Mr. Kelly has raised. I think if we're talking about risks of litigation, the risk of downzoning and spot zoning, which I think the pilot project would allow, is going to create a bigger litigation risk than going forward with a moratorium. I think with respect to the one project that's been submitted, that was done clearly not knowing what was going to happen under the pilot project. And as the trustees and the mayor knows, is full of a request for variances. And in fact, your prior zoning director, planning director recommended denial. So I don't think there's a vested right that's going to create a litigation risk with that particular project. I would encourage you to give a reasonable length of moratorium so that there can be legitimate and proper input from the residents with appropriate studies to back those up. I don't see how that can be done by the end of September, even with respect to Trustee Lewis's suggestion, which I thought was a good one, to extend that longer, even through the end of November is a very short period of time, and I don't think would give the quality of participation that would be meaningful. I encourage you to extend the moratorium to a longer period, include the pending project that's already been submitted, and give the residents an opportunity to provide meaningful input into the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Christine Muhlenweg. Okay. Is there anyone else from the audience wishing to speak? Please come forward. Let's start with Mel Eves. State your name and address.
Mayor, I had a written submittal
Is that correct, Danielle?
I told her I wanted to speak, and I think she assumed maybe I didn't.
Well, why don't you go ahead and speak? Let's not worry about what's written. But you do have 2 minutes, sir. Okay.
Thank you. This is an enormous change in the zoning in one of the really fine areas to live in. I've been there for 35 years. And it came as a real shock to me that the village would devise a program called a pilot program that solicited applications that were so in variance with existing zoning. This application has at least 8 major variances, which caused the Planning and Zoning Commissioner to recommend denial of the application. That's how different it is from what we already have in place. I want to read you what our Supreme Court has to say about this kind of situation. The case is the Albuquerque Commons Partnership versus City Council, 2008 case. New Mexico courts have often used the term downsizing as shorthand for those actions that require justification pursuant to the change or mistake rule and the zoning authority's own regulations for zoning amendments, which in this case are contained in the city resolution. The change or mistake rule adopted by this court in the Miller case and reaffirmed in the Davis case dictates that the proponent of a zoning change, in this instance the city, and in this instance the village is really proponing the change, must show that such a change is justified due to either a change in conditions in the community or a mistake in the original zoning. The fundamental justification for an amendatory or repealing zoning ordinance is a change of conditions necessary to protect the public interest, to cover and perfect previous defective ordinances or correct mistakes or injustices therein. The rule evidences a concern over the stability of zoning regulations and a landowner's right to rely on existing zoning rules. And then they cite back to the Miller case. The rule they're talking about, the rationale for it, is that the desirable stability of zoning classifications upon which the property owner has a right to rely. In this case.
Thank you, Mr. Eves. Your time is up. Thank you. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. I'm sorry. Okay, Loretta Chavez Smith.
Good evening, Mayor, trustees. My name is Loretta Chavez Smith. I live at 536 Chavez Road Northwest. I don't know if I could say it any better than Mel already said it. But anyway, the moratorium for the conservation pilot project, I think is very important, and that it be extended out until the traffic study, the proposed for the transportation system analysis that was already passed, that needs to be done before we go on any further with any projects in this village, throughout the whole village, because that's going to tell us where we're at, our infrastructure, our roads. That's so important to have that completed first, these moratoriums put into place. Let's take a breath. Let's pick up where so we know what we're going to be doing before we really ruin our village. Thanks, guys.
Is there anyone else willing to speak? Please come forward, state your name and address. You have 2 minutes for the record.
My name is Kate Luker-Eaton. I live in the village. I live in the village at 8639 Rio Grande Boulevard.
I have a vested property right. All of these people here have property rights dependent upon that area remaining zoned as it is. You are taking the value of our homes and diminishing it with this high cluster, high density development. And none of us trust you because you're all developers. And when you vote on something, one of you will recuse yourselves, but you don't leave the room. And that is not right for a conflict of interest. All of us want to know what you have your hands in because we know that you are self-dealing. You are self-dealing, and that is why at the June 8th meeting, Sandra Pacheco had her 3 friends or 2 daughters come and vote or speak in support of these projects while she recused herself. We need to know what their financial interest in these projects is. And nothing should move forward. And I will tell you what, litigation, there is no building permit. So Jim Long doesn't have a vested interest, but I can tell you who does. We do. And we are the village, and we no longer trust you. And that is why we insist on this moratorium.
Please come forward. State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
My name is Donald Bradley. I've lived here probably 40 years. I usually don't talk in time, but I've never seen anything so silly since that cottonwood tree where the Montano Bridge had to be built. And there were no cranes I love birds. My daughter had to move to Colorado because of the crime rate in Albuquerque. I have faith in these 6 people, the administrator and the entire village staff, and I just wanted to get that off my chest. Some elderly people tried to talk in behalf of me, how long they lived here. My dad was on the Trail of Tears. My mother's family from southern Colorado for 300 years, and we built a house with the older children with penny a brick from the prison. So that tells my longevity. I have faith that the Albuquerque Journal editorial said that the village should be able to work out things and also know that the ordinances for the tall structures go back to Mayor Hooker. Somebody wanted to remodel some old apartments that were empty for years and years a little further down 4th Street. And also in the North Valley is 1,400 plus people according to Wikipedia or Google. And we're just part of the North Valley. And if you look on those fancy maps, I didn't bring one with me, but we have about 6 of the 10 main attractions of the North Valley right here in the village. And we all don't need this BS to continue and no moratorium. Thank you.
Please come forward. Anyone else wishing to speak? State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Diana Clark, 601 El Paraiso Road Northwest. And I apologize for what I'm going to say before I even say it, because it's not very nice. I'm sorry, trustees, but you have not earned our trust at all. I wish it were different. But in order to quote Trustee Pacheco, she said that she didn't feel comfortable with the pilot program or with the moratorium. I don't feel comfortable with voting for you, any of you, for office again. And I am here to tell you that if you run again, I am here to work for the person that is working for the village and what we want. And that's what I intend to do. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, village trustees, my name is George Bello. I live at 1014 Ranchitos Road Northwest. I had no intention of speaking this evening, but during the comments that you guys were making, I heard that pilot projects were needing to be heard. I heard that loud and clear. I kept hearing, we need to determine if we like the project. I certainly want to hear Who is the we? We are the we, right here. People who signed that petition, they're the we. Not to sound curt, but I have to remind you, when you were elected on the premise that you would represent the people to whom you serve, the we. Please don't forget that. Support the moratorium. Thank you.
Please come forward. State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Gordine McKenzie, 7315 Guadalupe Trail, Northwest. Trustees and Mayor, I see that a lot of the ideas for the pilot project and a lot of the plans came out of a meeting with a Professor Ehrenfucht that you had come and speak to you. In fact, a lot of the things that she said basically found their way into the master plan. However, she has a lot of other ideas as well. And it's very problematic the way that things came into the master plan. It's very problematic, the high density. I watched a trustees meeting where Mayor Lopez asked Chad Reniker last October if he was going to present at a public hearing. And he said, oh, I don't think one is required. Trustee Pacheco asked Chad Reniker of Palindrome, is it going to still be senior housing? And he said, oh, I think it's going to be multi-family housing. And I was really taken aback when I heard him say that he's not going to be the sole owner of the property. Well, who is? There is so much that we don't know. I've been reviewing a U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Office of Smart Growth, and they are saying that a lot of rural areas have problems, and they recommend you do not tear out the heart of the rural area. You don't tear out what Jim Long is proposing to develop on, which the previous mayor was planning to buy for open space. That is what draws tourists, and that is what makes our village what it is. And this report also said, please consider the environment and consider the way that the buildings are being designed and only have one place. Do not scatter development everywhere. Do not do that. Keep it in one area and let us help plan and make it sane, make it environmental, and make it smart. And please extend the moratorium for 8 months at a minimum.
Thank you, Ms.
We need to
McKenzie.
talk.
Your time is up. Please come forward. State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Jennifer Kiefer, 722 Mullen Road. Thank you, Mayor and trustees, for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. I actually came prepared. As you consider these moratoriums, please be reminded of how these moratoriums came to be. The villagers whom you were elected to represent did not like the direction in which this village is going with high density and urbanization of the village. With some grassroots efforts, not rumors, Mr. Lewis, there were more than 650 signatures obtained from villagers throughout the community over a holiday weekend. These petitions specifically request that the governing body take the steps to protect the residents' rights and quality of life that currently exists in our beautiful community, and to cease all high-density and pilot projects until all village residents are surveyed to determine what the residents want. Let me kindly remind the mayor and board that from an IPRA request, there were 3 letters in support of the Chavez Guadalupe pilot project and 34 in opposition. This is significant and should not be taken lightly. Considering recent events, the moratorium should encompass the entire village and continue until the survey is completed, the village determines the legalities of the pilot project program ordinance, and the results of the transit system analysis are received. The opposition momentum is continuing to grow, as demonstrated by the growing crowds at each meeting, and funds are being collected to litigate this matter if necessary. Failing to amend and pass these moratoriums, in my opinion, is negligent. When your constituents are asking you to allow them to be a part of the process and not your adversary in these matters. In summary, amend and pass the moratoriums to encompass all the village, cease all high-density and pilot projects until resident survey is completed, village determines the legalities, and the results of the transit system analysis are received. This timeline of this will be dependent on village administration and how soon they can get these action items accomplished.
Thank you, Jennifer. Your time is up. Please come forward. State your name and address. You have 2 minutes.
Mayor and trustees, I'm Pat Hurley, and I live at 909 Salamanca. I've been resident there with my wife for 49 years, and I'm shocked at what I see going on in the village over these last few meetings. We don't get feedback from you while things are being said, but as a participant in this group out here, you can tell that it is a radical dissatisfaction with the direction that you're trying to go. And what could be more reasonable than to say, adopt a moratorium, get your stuff together, and do the studies that should have preceded anything like the palindrome project. And I don't mean just traffic, although that is important. You need to have somebody give you advice about how much the population of the village is expected to grow and how that's going to be handled and how you're going to deal with traffic congestion and the revision of streets. Do you have enough infrastructure? Have you got enough water and sewer? I know in the last meeting, I was delighted to hear, I think Mrs. Rinaldi, that she is on it and knows that you need these studies, but you needed them before you started making these commitments. And if you go back to your sacred 184 ordinance, it gives you the specific authority to reject any proposed plan, quote, that does not adequately conform to the 2035 master plan, close quote. When you look at the number of variances and at the greedy attempt to use conservation as a term so the developer swims in money, you gotta listen to somebody else. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you very much.
Please come forward. State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you. My name is Nancy McGough. I live at 730 Mullen, and I've lived here for 38 years. My in-laws have lived here 68 years until they died last year. And my parents live next to me, so lots of people. We all live in the southeast portion of Los Ranchos. And when you look at it, number one, look at your map. It doesn't even have us here. It doesn't have us here. Now, I was driving down 4th Street, and do you know where the nearest 3-story building is? It's way down there by Comanche, or Griegos now. It's way down there. So I went driving over to the Palindrome, over at Sawmill. And I was there at 2 in the afternoon, and the traffic was all backed up. It's all cement, all of it. And it was 3 stories high. And then I drove by the corner of Osuna and 4th Street. And I started thinking, can you imagine what 3 stories are gonna look like? Right there, it's gonna block everything. You are building in all of our green space. Excuse me. It just really gets me aggravated. But you are trying to build in all of our green space. And we're the ones that are going to suffer from it. We will suffer from it. Our value of our property is going to go down. So I want you to think about it. You need to listen to us, and you need to rethink Los Ranchos. We're not, I mean, we can make money if that's what you think you want to do. And I understand that, but not this way.
Thank you. Your time is up. Please come forward. State your name and address. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Daniel Goodman, 809 Tyler. I see the request made to have this meeting in a larger venue did not materialize.
It will.
I hope the input we have provided on 4th and Osuna does not meet the same fate. At the August 10th, 2022 meeting, I listened to all the heartfelt comments of disagreement from the wonderful residents of Los Ranchos. The commonality of their remarks were about the unique country living we enjoy here in the village. In 2006, I stood at the Los Ranchos Journal Center Rail Runner platform with Mayor Abram and others for the inaugural run. We discussed what a wonderful day it was. Mayor and I continued our discussion once we boarded. I'll never forget what Mayor Abrams told me. He said, Daniel, Los Ranchos is a very unique and special community in that it's an island of tranquil paradise surrounded by an ocean of humanity. He continued, just take a ride west on Alameda, cross the river, see the traffic and the pace of life on Coors. We are so lucky to live in Los Ranchos. In 2007, I attended the public meetings when Walmart wanted to build a super center at Vista del Norte in Osuna. That's where the Desert Springs Church is and where the balloons land. Bernalillo County Commissioner Debbie O'Malley and State Representative Ed Sandoval supported the residents of the area. Today, it's a beautiful park. The disagreement with the residents was not with the city-county leaders, it was with the developers of the property. This is gonna get real good.
Your time is up, sir.
One more sentence.
I'm sorry, sir. 2 minutes. No, your time is up. Please. I'm sorry.
We have the other moratorium.
Please come forward. State your name and address. You have 2 minutes.
Michelle Smiley, 623 El Paraiso Road. Mayor, trustees, ladies, gentlemen. Like we were saying, the master plan is a living document. It is made to be modified. This is not set in stone. I am in support of the moratorium, and you guys should be too. We would talk about trust, and I have meetings, I talk to my neighbors, and we're like, we need these trustees on our side. We almost have them on our side. But why do we have to fight so hard to get the trustees on our side? Like, why? Like, this is ridiculous that we're still even talking about this. None of us want this. This one is 27 feet from my property line. All of these are within 220 feet of each other. You guys are, in Los Poblanos or wherever, 3 miles away, 4 miles away. All this is in 1/3 of a mile of each other, and you are not taking that into sorry. And then, like we mentioned, that June 8th meeting, the 2 people that got up and spoke in favor of Jim Long's project were your husband and daughter. And you said that she recused herself, but she did not recuse herself. Like, it's clear where you're in favor and you're not, and you're still getting to vote on this matter, which is very unclear to me. And, we've been asking for a place to accommodate us. And there's actually less chairs in here today than there was last meeting when we asked you for that.
and you said that there were people in favor of that working on the master plan. I am in this room fighting against this. Where are those people in favor of this large density that worked on this master plan? Where, they're not one of them in this room. Where are they?
They're here, they're here.
All right, I said on June 8th, read the room. And I'm like, you guys are not reading the room. We do not want this. Please, please.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle. Please come forward. State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Nancy Nangeroni, 7315 Guadalupe Trail. Mr. Mayor, trustees, this is what happens when you do not obtain community support for your planning process that is planning radical change to our community. This is what happens when you do not build the trust. The Village Center plan was originally an attempt to obtain senior housing and some retail for this community, as I understand it. I wasn't here then, but that's my understanding. Now, you've seen fit to give it all away to Palindrome. Apparently, they have the right to make any decisions they want about the property, and we have no right to stop them. This is what we're told. This is not how you respond to your community. There was a survey taken in 2018 before the master plan meetings were convened. That survey showed greater than 2-to-1 opposition to all development, not just high density. And yet here we are having to turn out like this to try to bring some sense. We had a person who wanted to renovate an apartment, was told they could not renovate it unless they built 9 more units because they were required to have 10 units per half acre. This is insanity. This doesn't make sense, guys. We want to work with you. We want to be on a first name basis. We want to like all of you. But if you don't respond, if you continue in this direction, that's going to get more and more difficult. Please approve and extend the moratorium. September 30th is not enough time to revisit that ordinance. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you listening.
Please come forward. State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, my name's David Montoya, and I live at 517 Pueblo Solano. But I want to again thank you guys and the administration for all the work you do. I mean it sincerely. I went door to door for the trustees that we have. So, but I think, Sandra, you've been singled out, and it's a little unfair because your project that your husband's building is compliant. But what we have to understand, and you came with a 12 unit and you had to raise it up because of these goofy rules. And what we're trying to do is get you guys to listen and don't think of us as adversaries. Think of us as a part of the team, that we want to work with you. We have a different vision. I have property on 4th Street that I could make a lot of money on building tons of apartments. And I don't want it because I have 7 grandchildren that live in the village. So we want to be part of the team. And what I really want is just like the bed and breakfast. We headed in this direction. It was Larry Abraham that we all admire. He really pushed for this B&B and found out, and it was no objection really to bring in the B&B. As soon as it came out, everybody woke up and said, what the heck? And they came and we changed it. And guess what? It was unanimous. We changed it. So we have a precedent to do this. let's do this. And you'll see that the team members will work with you guys and we'll come up with a solution. These are not wild-eyed pistol wavers. We want good development. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Please come forward. State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Charles Eberly at 6501 Milwaukee Court Northwest in Los Ranchos. I have a couple of questions. First, what does it mean when you say in that master plan, a suitable place to develop cluster housing? What's suitable? And the problem we have with that lot that's at the end of Chavez and at Rio Guadalupe Trail is it's not suitable for cluster housing because it's part of the gem that's Chavez Road. And the other question is, how much time do you need to really decide what these things all mean? Because unless we know what we're talking about, I don't think we know what we're going to ask for. I think that we still know what the code is, and there's no reason that can't be developed using the code as an A1 property and get your 8 houses in there with open space, with everything that's appropriate, but not to make something obscene and ineffective in terms of meaning anything much to the community. That's all I had to say.
Thank you. Please come forward. State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Lauren Marble, 338 Narvaeza Court. Okay, so I was interested in the 2018 meeting just for some filling out of the process and speaking to the issues of trust, and do we trust the developer and trust you, and what's our role in all this? So in 2018, the November 14th meeting, there was an RFP put out for the 4th and Osuna project, and Palindrome had received the vote for being the developer. Now at that meeting, it was very similar to some of these meetings. People were concerned, like, what's the rush? There were notice problems, the same concerns, traffic, the environment, infrastructure, air, the rural nature, high density. And basically the theme was listen to the residents, please. One woman said, I am pleading with the mayor and trustees that they put this on hold. And the other thing that happened in that one was they chose the developer first, much like the plan here. And, you know, let's see what the developer brings to us and we'll work with them. People were uncomfortable with that, saying, we should have a plan, we should know before we turn everything over. And then there were reassurances like, you will have lots of opportunities for input here, and we will basically work with you. So basically the motion to pick Palindrome carried 2-0. And the reason for that is one trustee recused themselves, and the Mayor Pro Tem was Mr. Lopez here, so he was not present as a trustee. The mayor had died. So we need to learn something from this. Fast forward, you know, we're saying the same things, and we need to fix this thing that's broken.
Your time is up, ma'am. Thank you. Come forward. State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
My name's Tom Donlin. I live at 6668 Edgewood Drive Northwest. Good evening, Mayor and trustees. I come to you because we ask those of us that signed the petition for a moratorium because we've lost trust in that your vision for this village and your vision of the master plan matches what ours is. And part of that may be our responsibility because we didn't come and attend all the meetings. But that doesn't change the facts that what the village want isn't what you're giving us. We've lost trust that you do that, and we're asking for the moratorium so that you have the opportunity to regain our trust and to carry forward and continue to build a village and run a village like we want it to be run. It's plain and simple as that. And to continue to say that this matches the master plan, I think at this point should be, that's sort of like saying, well, that's the way Tommy did it, so I get to do it too. Because we've obviously demonstrated that there is a different vision than what you got from that master plan that we want for the village. And we really want you. We are your voters. We are your employers. We want something different than what you're giving us. And your comments and your reluctance to listen to us is deafening. Please, as several of us several of the previous people have spoken, have said, we want to work with you. We believe you want to make a wonderful and amazing village here. Work with us to do that, please.
Thank you. Come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. Patricia Garcia Martinez. I live at 512 Grecian Northwest. I'm on the border of Los Ranchos, and then on the other side of me is a corporation where Smith is. We're all in this together. Everyone has said exactly how we feel. And I'm not emotional, but I am passionate. And I've mentioned before, I was raised on this property. It means an awful lot to me, to my family, to all the Chavezes. I'm part of the Chavez family, as I've said before. But I have to bring up a fact. Don, Camille and I campaigned for you with all my heart. And we went down early on when we heard that this was going to happen to planning and zoning. We walked in this room, and there was this huge, big table. There was men sitting all around this table. Guess what they were doing? They were planning every little inch of this landscaping or whatever planners do, but they were busily working. And I'm sure they were from out of town. But I'm here to plead with you also. Please, let's do something for our village. Please give back to us. North Domingo Baca has a wonderful community center and everything else for their area. We could do something like that. We really need a swimming pool, a community center. We don't need to be meeting in here and not having enough room. Everyone here is passionate. But I think that bringing in Palindrome was a big mistake. They're out of state Nevada. They don't care about us. Please, we have plenty of construction people here that I'm sure are thoroughly educated and experienced. I had a man make me a patio cover after 62 years. Just last week, they finished it in less than 5 days, and it is awesome. And Don, I have to tell you, and I never did, I am so sorry about you losing your wife.
Thank you.
I lost my husband of 62 years in September, and it's not easy. And then you all doing all of this, we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
But sientan los corazones, please. Thank you very much.
Please come forward, state your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
My name is Ronald Foster Seaton, more generally known as Terry Seaton. I live at 336 Naravisa Court Northwest. But I point that out because of its proximity to the proposed development. Actually, I wasn't planning to speak, but there is a point that you may have considered, but I haven't heard anybody ask you to consider it. So that is, a lot of people are concerned about their property values when higher density population is coming on. I'm more concerned with the ongoing per capita cost of services, which, I mean, other than truly rural, which at least this part of the village doesn't look like, we're not mostly farms here, though other parts of the village look more rural. Other than rural, the more dense the population, the higher the per capita cost of services, police, fire, sewage, stuff like that. And that's ongoing, and I just want to make sure that you consider that. Thank you.
Please come forward. State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the Board of Trustees. My name is John Salazar with the Rhodey Law Firm. I represent Chavez, Guadalupe, and I'm here just to make a few comments about some of the things that have been said. But I think we need to go back to the beginning and start, how did this all start? There was a recognition in the village that there was a need for housing alternatives for the people of the village. That's how it all started. And then that got incorporated in the master plan. And the master plan specifically said, one of the ways we can address the housing needs in the village is to provide for cluster development. And then the zone ordinance was adopted and allowed cluster development. So presently, under the ordinance as it existed before the pilot ordinance, you could have subdivisions with more density than allowed by the underlying zone. That's been in the zone code. This has gone on for years. And then what you did, to implement the vision of the master plan, you adopted the pilot program to get some innovative ideas. And in response to that, you got one proposal that's pending. And, but I wanted to just mention a couple of things that it was suggested that your ordinance allows spot zoning. It doesn't. Your ordinance does not change the zone. There is no spot zoning because you keep the underlying zone. That's the way your ordinance is set up. And so all you do is allow a use consistent with the zone. That is not even a change of use. It's the same use. It was residential, it's still residential under the pilot ordinance. So, and with regard to Chavez, Guadalupe, and there's been some comments about that, we're just starting the process. And a lot of people have been upset with what was initially proposed. But as Jim Long mentioned to you at the June meeting, he appreciated the comments that were made. He appreciated the letters that were sent in. And he was looking for response and ideas. And I can tell you, the plan is going to be changed. He listened, he heard. He's going to do something about it. That's why we appreciated the fact that this board gave us until November to come back with a revised plan after meeting with the neighbors.
Thank you, John. Your time is up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is there anyone else? Please come forward, state your name and address. You have 2 minutes.
Oh, my name is David Hudson, a resident of the village.
Please come to the mic, please.
Oh, of course. My name is still David Hudson. I've lived in the village for about 18 years now. I moved here from the Washington, D.C. area. And I've been on the Lavender Committee for 12 years, chairman of the Lavender Committee for 14 maybe. And I can't tell you how many people I've talked to, Lavender Festival attendees, that say what a wonderful place we have here. The village, quite a few of them said, I never knew this existed in the city. I have to correct them and say, this is not in the city, it's the village of Los Ranchos, but that's a minor issue. As long as they know about where it is and they attend the festival and help us support the agricultural for the festival, for the village, I'm sorry. They're happy and I'm happy. However, I've looked at this plan, Village Center Project, which I spoke mostly against that to you all months ago. I said, be careful. The village is going to own this property, and you're going to have somebody that's going to develop it and rent it, and you'll be competing with existing vacant stores on 4th Street. That's like unfair competition. But it went through, it's built. Now we have new vacant stores and old vacant stores. So I have looked at this Village Center project here. I've looked at this way and that way, and I have yet to see something that looks like it belongs in the village. Now, there are two pseudo silos in this plan that might have a resemblance to the silo over at Los Poblanos, but this is clearly a facade. So I have been to 5 or 6 meetings in the last 3 months.
David, your time is up, please. Your time is
Can you
up.
say pretty, please?
Please.
Mr. Hudson.
Okay.
Thank you,
Mr.
David.
Hudson, before you leave the podium, please state your name and address. Mr. Hudson?
Thought he did, but maybe not.
No, he did not.
Yeah, state your name and address, sir.
David Hudson, still, 529 Rail Road, R-O-E-H-L.
Thank you, David. Now, next person.
Thank you so much.
Please state your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Sandria Cook and 303 Schulte Northwest. I am really will be affected by the palindrome proposal. What I want to say is that this community has come forward. They have been articulate. They have been civil, which is surprising sometimes. They have been passionate, and they've come forward with ideas. There was an idea of having a village plaza, where this huge thing was, and a museum that promoted what the village had in it. And there could be community events, just like what they do in Los Poblanos, which brings in hundreds of people. So I am asking you to approve this moratorium and also to put it forward, because a month is not enough. It is not nearly enough. 6 months probably isn't even enough. But there needs to be a lot more, somebody said in the previous meeting about advertisement is not informing. There needs to be a lot more informing so that people really see it, and it needs to be disseminated into the entire village, not just a little bit, not just in the magazine, which is really good, but frankly, a lot of people don't read it, or you don't have time. But there needs to be a lot more of this, and you need to listen to the people, because we do live here. I remember this place as a little kid in the worm house. I remember the chicken farm. It's a rural place, and that's what makes it a village. And all these voices are what make it a village. And I hope that you listen to what our hearts are saying and what these reasonable, logical people are saying to you, is that we don't want any more crazy development. We can have development, but it needs to be in keeping with this place being a village. Thank you.
Please come forward. State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
My name is Tanya Spacco, and I live at 9 Applewood Lane in the village. And I just wonder, where are the scale models that, say, Palindrome is putting out here at this table or in one of these rooms? Where are the scale models? We can look at this map, or we can look at a picture, a representation that seems to be changing, but we're not able to actually see with our own eyes an architect's scale model. Do they offer this?
There will be one, I understand.
Soon?
Yes.
Before he comes back and actually talks about.
I can't answer that question, but I hear you.
It's something that you could ask for.
I understand what you're saying. Please, go forward.
Well, it's one of those things where I think that if we could somehow see the impact, we would be able to understand what we're locking into. Right now, things like the sunlight that isn't going to be available from the west to the people that live east of the Palindrome project, that's a real thing, and I think probably legally they could go after the village for that, if they wanted solar panels, for instance. Just saying that there are lots and lots of ways to present future buildings, and this includes the Long Project, too, on Chavez Hall and on Guadalupe Trail and Chavez. So I'm just saying from a visual point of view, we need more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? The floor is now closed for comments. Did you want to say something, Administrator Simon?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Trustees. I just wanted to make mention that we are planning to have a workshop with easels and pictures and a scaled model of the palindrome project at the end of the month.
Thank you. I am going to call for the question. I'm going to call. Of course. Let me just say this. It will be advertised. Everybody will be invited, and we'll go from there. Please. The floor is now closed for comment. I'm going to call for the question. I'm going to call for the roll call vote. Trustee Pacheco.
No.
Trustee Benavides.
Yes.
Trustee Lewis. Attorney Nan Winter, can you read the motion again, please? Go ahead, Danielle.
My understanding on the motion is to approve Resolution 20220802. Motion by Trustee Benavides. Is that correct? Seconded by Trustee Lewis. As written.
Okay. O2.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Trustee Radnovich.
Mayor, we're still going to have conversation about it, yes? Still discussion?
That's you have the floor. You can say anything you want. Okay?
So if I vote yes right now, the conversation's over?
That's correct.
No.
That means the mayor gets to break the tie, and I am going to vote yes.
Voted the wrong way.
It passes. The motion carries 3 votes to 2. We're going to move to item D now, but I am going to ask for a 10-minute recess for a bathroom break. We will be back in 10 minutes.
The wrong way. No, I was going to vote yes. I don't know why I said that.
I'm right behind you. Straight out of the car. Yeah. For them to attack you like that.
Hey. Let's go, sir. I was going to vote yes. I don't know why. I didn't know. Drafted as an issue. No, you didn't for the pilot project. Oh, I get all that. I told you. So if that's required, ordinances shall.
I know, I almost had my fingers in. I am calling the meeting back to order. The time is 7:47. Thank you. Item D, discussion and approval of resolution number 2022-08-03, a resolution imposing a moratorium on higher density residential development in the C1 zone, south of Osuna and Chavez Road. Attorney Winter.
Mayor, trustees, similar to the caveat I delivered earlier, again, moratoriums are not favored but generally upheld depending on the term of the things and whether or not there's a legitimate health, safety, and welfare or environmental consideration attached to the moratorium. In this particular case, we're looking at this particular resolution imposes a moratorium on higher density residential development in the C1 zone south of Osuna and Chavez Road. If you look at a zone map of the village, there is C1 zoning, a couple of spots of C1 zoning south of Osuna and Chavez, and the vast majority of C1 zoning is far north on 4th Street. My recollection, and Ann can correct me, is that it's substantially further north than Pueblo Solano. So the Village Center zone pretty much occupies most of the corner of Osuna and 4th Street. So the largest concentration of C1 zoning is far north 4th Street. In recent months, the village has received at least 2 applications or proposals for higher density residential housing located on or near the corner of 4th and Osuna. These applications are in addition to projects already in progress and located in the Village Center zone. Again, the opportunity for additional redevelopment exists. The village has received significant public comment concerning impacts on traffic potentially created by any new higher density residential housing located at this particular corner. The village has already conducted a traffic analysis for the 4th Street revitalization project. That traffic analysis, I believe, is posted on the village website. It's dated March 31, 2015. That traffic analysis demonstrated significant benefits, and I'm quoting, to be gained on 4th Street by reconfiguring parts of the roadway to a 3-lane, close quote, configuration. Again, a copy of that traffic analysis is available on the village website. The village also received the required traffic impact study dated June 13th, 2022 for the southwest quadrant of Osuna Road and 4th Street for the Village Center project. And when I say it's required, it was required by ordinance. The traffic impact study demonstrated no negative impacts on capacity and level of services associated with the Village Center project. Again, conducted by ordinance, posted on the village website. The village has now, pursuant to our last meeting, proposed to retain qualified professionals to accomplish a comprehensive transportation system analysis to include existing conditions and modeling for growth and development, including potential infill and redevelopment at currently allowable densities. And when I speak to currently allowable densities, keep in mind that the C1 zone, the VC zone, all contemplate a housing density, and those densities were set in 2016 and 2017. Those are not recent developments. The village desires to further review the above referenced traffic analysis, that is the traffic analysis related to 4th Street, and the traffic impact study that is now posted to the village website regarding the Village Center project, and other ordinance requirements for additional traffic studies relevant to higher density residential housing located on or near the corner of 4th and Osuna. And the village would like to do that before considering any further applications or proposals for such higher density residential housing in that area. The village, like the moratorium you just considered, also desires to better understand the planning process resulting in the density requirements in the commercial zone. It is unclear to the village. We believe that some of the commercial that is located south of 4th, Osuna and Chavez was actually inherited. That was annexed in, and the current commercial zoning we understand to have been just inherited on annexation. That it's not something that was created or mandated by the village or any governing body previously. So this moratorium imposes this particular resolution states that a moratorium shall be imposed on the acceptance of applications proposing higher density residential development in the C1 zone for any parcels zoned C1 and located south of Osuna and/or Chavez Road.
Thank you, Attorney Winter. At this time, I need a motion to approve resolution number 2022-08-03.
I would like to make a motion to approve resolution 2022-08-03 with the following amendments.
Go ahead.
I want to include all of the village C1 and all of the village VC, not just north and south. And I hope I get a second so we can at least discuss this. Thank you.
I need a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to have discussion from the governing body on this. Let's start with Trustee Pacheco.
Again, I have a problem with this because this is 4th Street. This is a road that has been commercial for as long as I can remember. Well before I came to live in the village, 4th Street was a commercial zone. This has always been probably the most dense area of the village of Los Ranchos. This is where all transactions, retail, restaurants has taken place. This is kind of the heart of Los Ranchos in terms of commercial use. And therefore, it just lends itself to be a more dense area of the village of Los Ranchos. And again, as we discussed this in the master plan, there were 3 character areas, that were identified in the master plan. And the 4th Street corridor was identified as the commercial zone, and that, this is where all our commercial business was going to take place. So I understand there's a lot of people that are upset with regard to the amount of density, and I get you, I hear you. It can be a lot. It can be a lot. I also, though, I want to be sure that, again, we're not putting ourselves in a position with projects that have already started the process where people have spent money and made decisions based on what our current code says. And that really, I struggle with that. People, like I said, people have made decisions based on the code that we have written in our zone. And to tell somebody that, the money you spent, the time that you spent, everything that you've done for that piece of property is now going to be moot because we said so. I don't think that's fair. And I wouldn't, if it were any of you and you were doing the same thing, I wouldn't think it was fair. So that being said, I want to hear what the other trustees have to say. But I guess I could support this moratorium if we allow any project that's already been proposed or discussed to move forward. And again, these people have spent money. They've also talked to our administration. They received direction based on what the zoning currently states. So that's what I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Trustee Benavides.
Mayor?
Yes.
I just want to make sure I understand Trustee Benavides' motion. And I think I got it right. A moratorium on all C1 development and VC development, village center development?
Only high density.
Residential high density?
Yes.
Okay.
Not to include, as in the wording here, it's only imposed on the acceptance of applications. So I think that means anything that's already in the pipeline is not included.
Okay. Then the only issue I have with the motion, Mayor, is that we did not advertise a village center moratorium. And so it is probably not appropriate to consider a moratorium on that without public notice.
I agree, and so you will have to amend your motion.
Well, that's a surprise. Given that I want to make this as broad as possible, and I don't want to see this die, I am going to amend my motion to remove VC.
I need a second.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
The conversation going.
Okay. Trustee Pacheco, do you have any comments on that? Trustee Benavides?
Yeah, let me start up by saying this is what I think about all the opposition to the housing density issue, okay? In my mind, this is what it isn't. This is not a loud minority. This is not a group opposed to creating affordable housing. This is not a group that was unwittingly assembled by an agitator, and it is not anti-development. Because this moratorium is not opposed to a commercial retail. It's just high-density housing. Let me tell you what I think this opposition is, in my opinion. This is a majority opinion opposed to high-density housing. People that are concerned about the character of the village, this is what you guys are all about. And when I say character, it's the look and feel of the village. People believe that developments in C1 and VC should favor commercial and retail businesses. And I think you guys are represented by all demographics and all regions within the village. There are two reasons that I want a comprehensive moratorium on high-density housing development. One, I represent the people. Two, I actually feel the same way on many of the same points that you guys are expressing. And I don't think there's a downside to doing this. So let's do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Lewis?
Thank you. I have a hard time putting a moratorium on it because I don't believe moratoriums are fair in the long run. Mr. Eves, I jotted quickly some of the things you said, and I think you were right on the track that I'm on. And that is, the village is a wonderful place to live. And part of that reason is because long-term the village has been created by the zoning we've enacted and the ordinances we've enacted and the process we have gone through to be consistent with the enactment of them. And so, first of all, I feel like the village center process, I feel good about it. I feel like we followed the process. I feel like when you get a board or you get a zoning director that starts deviating or interpreting it to their own advantage or to what they want, the whole system crumbles. And this village has done a great job of being consistent with the process. And I feel like the minutes and the transcripts of what we've done for the last 6-7 years will show that we have followed the process. And I'm a believer in the process. So this is what I've heard going forward. And here's what I've heard in the last 3 months. I've heard Trustee Benavides say he wishes that we would review the AC zone. I've heard some people say our requirement for posting signs on the property when there's to be some kind of hearing, they're not large enough. I've heard people say the current method of contacting people is inadequate. And I did hear a good one the other day that I would like to put out whenever we get to this point of consideration. I talked to a friend in another state and they said, well, we're under the same requirement. We notify people within 300 feet, but we've also decided when a development is over a certain size, we notify every registered homeowners association in the village. And then it's up to them to disseminate it to their. So those are little changes. I heard David Montoya say, That's crazy that I have to build this many houses or this many apartments on my property. Well, that's been our C1 zone for years. And, well, that's not when we first changed that, I don't believe. But I'm not a zoning guy, that particular requirement. I heard Loretta Chavez Smith last week. She was upset that poor Mr. Archibek had to go, it took 8 months to get his home approved, to get built. So I hear people say they're okay with density but not high density. Well, what is to be the definition of density? And so at times I feel like what you folks are asking for and what I would propose is that we bring in a consultant to examine maybe it's time to examine the village's zoning. I mean, you all are talking about all different parts of it. And so now that we've got active public involvement, this is a great time to have somebody go through our zones, let you guys know what each zone says, so there aren't surprises. Let you guys then, let us weigh in on if we want to make modifications, just like I said on the contacting of people. I mean, there's little things in our zones that need to be changed. There maybe are some big things. There maybe are some things that don't apply today, and maybe they are, because that has been the strength of this village, is the process. You know, people don't come in, and you don't have to worry if you want to build something. As long as you're following the rules and the process, people can't come in because they just don't like you or don't like your project. And so my feeling is what we're asking is something that goes beyond a moratorium, and that is an examination of our zoning. And so I'm not really for putting a moratorium on it. I'm certainly not for going backwards on things that have come through the process properly. But I do think we are at the point now, at a critical point, where I think to bring in a consultant to examine each one of our zones, make everybody aware of all the things they say, me included. I'm not a zoning expert. One of the biggest strengths we had was Tiffany Justice, because she followed the rules, period. And so I think this is a great time to educate everybody on what our rules are as a village. And if there's things we want to change, then let's get involved in the process and do it. But it's going to take longer. It's going to be a long process and a hard process, and people are going to have to stay involved. So that's really where I am, in that I don't think the moratorium's the right way to go, but I sure think this is the time to start a discussion and an examination of our zoning rules. So,
Thank you. Trustee Radnovich.
I agree with much of what Trustee Lewis says. I think that we need to re-examine where we want to go as a village, and that includes everybody here and includes a lot of other residents as well. I attended every one of the master plan meetings that we had, and I saw some of you there, not many. And there were a lot of participation. There was probably as much participation in those, and Alan, you went. Mayor, I'm not sure if you went or not. I know Sandra did. But that was a really well-done process. Whether or not everyone in this audience agrees, it was a really well-done process. It was facilitated. It was voted on, I'll say, at some level. And there were probably 60 people at every one of those meetings, maybe more.
There were more.
So what they had to say, and that was 2.5, 3 years ago, was quite different than what most of you are saying tonight and last time and the time before that. I want to know where those people come down on this whole issue, because I don't believe we've heard them yet. Or if they have come down on the side of a moratorium and that we're doing the wrong thing as a village, then we need to change it. But I think it has to be a facilitated meeting, And I think the meeting in September has to be a facilitated meeting, and we have to listen to each other. And it doesn't need to be the sort of audacious comments that some people have said towards us as trustees and the mayor, but it needs to be civil. And we're here to do the best job we can. We care about the village, and I think most of you know that. So that said, I do think that what I'm hearing tonight, and based on the reaction that people have had over the past 3 months or so, I think we need to consider a moratorium, because if we don't, it's just going to continue at the level it is, at this volume level that it is, and I think we need to listen. But I also think we need to incorporate some of the things we've heard in the recent past and the far past in our thinking about this. And so I do have a question for you, Nan. In terms of if we pass a moratorium tonight, how does that sit? And I know I'm not going to get all these projects right, but how does this sit, or how do the developers of these projects sit within the moratorium for the high density zones that we have established so far?
Trustees, there is only one project that I'm aware of that's in process that would be affected by this. But you would essentially be turning away anyone that wants to make a higher density residential application. And higher density in C1, I believe, let me look it up here real quick. I think it allows, I know with respect to, hold on here, let me get to the residential thing. The residential limitations in C1 are all residential, with multifamily, including assisted living, being conditional. Daycare facilities are permissive. Mixed use is permissive. Garage sales, estate sales, permissive. Single family detached. Townhomes, condominiums with a minimum of 10 and a maximum of 20 dwelling units per acre. So I'm assuming that's what you would be calling higher density residential. So the moratorium would essentially shut down any applications for single family detached townhouses, condominiums in the 10 to 20 dwelling units per acre range.
Okay.
What is the height to be able to do that? 38 feet, that's the height. Am I correct, Attorney Winter?
I believe that's correct. Hold on.
I'm pretty sure.
Height limitations in the C1 is 39 feet.
39, okay. Thank you.
I think that's all I have to say for right now.
Okay, then at this time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go right ahead.
I apologize. Like the other moratorium that we just passed, if we pass this moratorium, it may require more time than November 30th. And I do agree with Trustee Lewis about it's not fair to those who own these lands to elongate this for too long. But November 30th seems, for this one particularly, seems like a short period of time to me. So, and I haven't rectified that in my own mind yet, but it seems to me that at least till the end of the year, if not a little bit into next year, this moratorium could take place if we pass it. Another thing I have a question about is suppose, and this would be for either Nan or you, Ann, if we passed it for a shorter amount of time, and say we passed it till the end of October, as just an example, can we at the end of October then decide if we need more time and can extend that moratorium, or at the end of November even.
Mayor Trustee, I think my recommendation would be to, if you're going to pass the resolution and adopt a moratorium, would be to not extend it at a later time. In other words, pick a time you can live with, only because there are developers, interested parties that need to rely on what you have in the books. And just based on my reading of the case law, stringing them out makes it difficult for them to plan and do what they think they need to do as the ordinance guides them.
That makes sense.
Okay.
I think the biggest problem with the high density, and by that definition, it's all relative, right? I mean, if this were in downtown Denver, or even downtown Albuquerque, that would not be high density. But in the village of Los Ranchos, it is. But I think the biggest problem with our code is that we didn't require more building articulation and more massing. I think a 3 or 4 story building can be done in many ways. And I think if the massing requirements were stronger in our ordinance, we may not be in the position we're in right now. So that would be the piece that I would most like to look at if we do pass this moratorium. So I think I'd like to probably even add that as an amendment to your extension of the moratorium, that we specifically look at that. Thank you.
Okay, go right ahead.
Again, I think what we're asking, or what I'm hearing from you folks, is an examination of zoning, which is gonna take a while. That is not something that's done. And to quote Mr. Eves, landowners have rights and they depend on stability. And that's what we've given them. And so if you drag this out, you start infringing on all of their rights.
Yep.
And so that's why I don't like the moratorium context of it, because I think they've really brought it to the attention that it's time to look at our zoning and to go through it. And I think this is an awesome time because we have passionate people involved and to learn. I was surprised to go back and, oh yeah, that is what the density is in C1. That is the height. You don't memorize all these things. And I think also doing this as far as examining our zoning and making modifications if necessary also will help get our new zoning director up to speed, as well as all of us. And so I'm very torn on moratorium or extending it. But yeah, I'm pretty torn there.
Any further comment? Go ahead.
Unless Sandra has something to, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I like Trustee Lewis, I'm not comfortable again with imposing a moratorium on people who have followed the rules. And these people have followed the rules. You may not like them. We may not like them, but they followed the rules. There is zoning there for a reason. And we share that with everybody. And there's probably people, obviously, that are not here tonight that have followed the rules and built what they built, and they've moved on. This happens to be a hot topic right now, obviously, with everybody. But I'm not comfortable pushing forward a moratorium on developers and citizens that follow the rules based on the current code. I don't know if there's another way to examine our zoning code so that we do get something that maybe is more reflective of what we all want. But I don't think penalizing people who are following the rules the right thing to do. I don't feel that way. And I also, and I'll revert to Nan again. I mean, what is the exposure to the village in terms of imposing something like this?
Mayor, trustees, the New Mexico courts have upheld moratoriums in the 4 to 8 month range, but that doesn't stop somebody from litigating, right? It doesn't stop somebody who's followed the rules from coming in and filing suit. Again, the courts have upheld short-term moratoriums with, health, safety, and welfare, at the heart of its, at the heart of the issue. For the record, you had a massive rewrite of the village center zone in 2016, and Mr. McDonough's here. He can attest to the fact that you had 5 meetings of the Planning and Zoning Commission rewriting the village center zone to accommodate what is now the Palindrome project. And so it took, a half a dozen commissioners 4 or 5 months to rewrite the village center zone. So I'm not sure what you're thinking of, but I just want to give you an idea of how long it took to rewrite. And then it took the board another year to adopt the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation.
So, Attorney Winter, what you're saying then is this is not a process that is months long. This could be a process that could be months and even a year long.
Mayor, trustees, it could be, it could be anything you want it to be. I mean, your master plan was also a year in the making. But if you're talking more than just VC zone, if you're talking VC zone, C1 zone, and what else? Rewriting of the conservation development, you're talking probably a long time and a lot of effort, and probably longer than a moratorium could justify.
Okay, Trustee Benavides.
Well, about following the rules, if we had to worry about not changing any of our ordinances because we have to follow the rules, then we would never change anything. So I think I just heard that there should not be a legal issue to having a moratorium for a duration between 4 and 8 months. And we're only talking about one thing, one bullet in these moratoriums, in these ordinances that we need to change. Density, housing density. That's all we need to focus on. Admittedly, I tend to underestimate how long things take. But, if somebody wants to, thinks we need to go till December or January, I'm okay with that. I think this moratorium does not prevent us from doing what Trustee George Randovich wants to do. And the threats of litigating, I think that threat is already with us anyway. Thank you.
Any further comments from the governor?
Mayor, I have one. I'm a little bit concerned about looking at zoning right now. And the reason is that we don't have a zoning officer. We don't have a planner. And I can tell you from looking at the adverts that the city of Albuquerque has and other companies that are in the private world, it's going to be hard to find one. And so who are we going to go to help us work through this? And you had mentioned a consultant, Councilor Lewis, and I'll tell you there's, and I hate to bring up my own personal experience so many times, but there are very few planners, there are none in Albuquerque, that can do work in the zoning area. There are very few in the country. And so finding one of those zone writers is going to be an issue, and we don't even have a zoning officer or a planner on staff at this
May I
point.
interject? It appears that we may have a person very soon. It would be improper for me to say, who it could be, but I do believe that the individual who may come to work for us, and then we're moving on to find a planner, will be an exceptional individual. Let me just leave it at that, okay? Any further comments?
Still, Mayor, not to degrade anything that you said, but zoning is a very complex topic.
It is. You're right.
And there are very few people that do that. The two closest ones I know of are in Denver and Dallas.
Thank you.
And
Mr. Mayor, could I?
Of course. Feel free. Yeah.
This isn't, the floor's not open.
Just a moment.
Excuse me, just a clarification. Attorney Winter, in her discussion about the zone code in 2016, used the term to accommodate palindrome. Palindrome wasn't even on the board yet. That whole zone, oh, okay, I'm sorry.
folks, there have been many occasions where people have spoken when they're not supposed to, so.
Thank you, trustee. So I just want to clarify that because things get heard, they get spread. Palindrome was not even in the game when we did that. And we did that with the assistance of a consultant who works with zoning. And that was that process. And it's why it took 5 meetings. So.
Thank you.
Thank you for your indulgence.
Okay. So go right ahead, Trustee Lewis.
You know, I agree with what Trustee Benavides has said. That's our main emphasis. That's going to be a very hard emphasis because if you ask anybody in the room for a definition of density and then high density, there's probably going to be 50 different answers. But I think it's something we need to tackle, and I don't disagree with that at all. But I do want to go back to my comments is that what I've heard in the last 3 meetings with these folks is there's a lot of things in our zoning that just don't sit right. And so I don't want to walk away from that. I have no problem addressing this issue. It's going to be a tough, sticky issue because landowners have rights. And I did not know that until tonight that one of our C1 zones, you know, came when we formed the village, it was already C1. Well, but that person's got a lot of rights because they've been C1 for 60 years. And so a moratorium isn't fair to them. It's a tough one, but I do think it's what we need to address in the short term, and I hope that we will continue to work towards, especially while we have all this involvement in addressing our zoning and educating all of us better and seeing if the times have changed and we need to modify.
Thank you. At this time, Danielle, will you read any submitted written comments first? You will have 2 minutes for each submission.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and trustees, a moratorium on higher density residential development in the C1 zone south of Osuna and Chavez Road will permit other developments to be built on the rest of 4th Street. Since it appears Los Ranchos has an opportunity for a possible traffic study in the near future, let's stop building until we know how much load the infrastructure will bear. We might also want to look at encouraging building design and landscape features that will reduce heat absorption, soften and absorb noise, reduce energy use, and in other ways conserve the livability of our village for new residents as well as the current ones. 4th and Osuna is one node of a continuous stream of traffic and all the complications that come with it. We need to consider the whole of it. Amend the resolution to include the other C1 zone properties along 4th Street and ensure that a traffic study includes the whole corridor. Thank you, Kathleen Hall, 322 Tyler Road Northwest, Los Ranchos. The second submission, dear Mayor and Trustees, we reside in the A1 Rural Residential Zone along Rio Grande Boulevard, and our
That is our submission. It was submitted with incorrect facts. Please do not read it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Noted for the record. With that being said, Mayor and Trustees, I turn it back over to you.
Thank you. I will now call on the individuals that signed up prior to the meeting wishing to speak only on this matter of business. I will then call anyone else wishing to speak after. You will be allowed 2 minutes, and I respectfully ask each of you to adjust the time. Miss Linda McKee.
Oh, wait, that's not on.
Linda McKee, 749 Chavez Road Northwest. I only have a few comments. I just want to say I do support a moratorium on all high-density applications, and that would include everything that's in the pipeline now. I do support broadening the scope of the moratorium to include the entire village and not just the C1 parcels located south of Osuna and Chavez. Given that this could be, if the vote goes that way, the second study going on at the same time, I do strongly encourage you to consider extending it to a minimum of 6 months so that we have a thorough, thoughtful, and collaborative approach for the high-density planning process in the commercial zone. Thank you.
Mr. Randy McKee. State your name and address.
Yes, I'm Randy McKee. I live at 749 Chavez Road Northwest. I do have to say I've tried to be very, very respectful of you all. All my comments have been directed at requesting. I've not challenged anyone, but I will say tonight I'm just a little bit irritated. Property rights. When I bought into this village, I thought there were stable property rights. It took 6 months to get my house approved to build. 6 months. Not unlike her friend that she knows down on the north end last week. There were all kinds of things that I had to do and jump through, things that they wouldn't allow me to do, and I had a conforming house when we started. Since then, I've now been in front of you all 3 times. All 3 times you have trashed my property rights. You trashed them when I have a nightmare neighbor that has done everything in the freaking world against violations of this code and ordinance. I've had Keen Heidelman, I've had Mr. Radosevich out, we've had a number of people out. No one's even responded. This person is trashing the neighborhood, seriously. Then came Casa Rodena. We had to fight like heck against an AC zoning rule that just put in, eventually, a whole bunch of events that absolutely I listen to every single Friday and Saturday night. Granted, it's been down a little bit, but we do that. Now we get ready to go into a cluster housing, and you all give us a 45, maybe 50-day moratorium. Don't even bother. Don't even bother. You can't do anything in 50 days. You're standing here talking about ordinances taking months. You're considering something that's going to change our area drastically. Those are my property rights that are right there across the street from it. And you have not listened to me, not once. Not once. My property rights, I bought into stable property zoning, and you all have trashed it.
Thank you. Mr. Patrick Hurley. Is Patrick Hurley still here? Thank you. Come forward. State your name and address. You have 2 minutes.
Mr. Mayor and Trustees, my name is Patrick Hurley, hasn't changed. I live at 909 Salamanca Northwest, and it's been the same for a long time. It's hard to come up with a plan that is going to make everybody feel comfortable. There are risks. I think your attorney is giving you conservative, cautious advice, but whatever you do, you got the risk of litigation from somebody. And the best way you can avoid difficulties is to do the right thing: transparency, notice, and participation. You're doing part of that. We appreciate it. I strongly disagree with the way the palindrome project was settled before people had any idea about the way it was going to affect the appearance of Fourth and so on. But there are other things about that transaction that I think may cure it and eliminate it, and I hope they do. Thank you very much.
Ms. Camille Varos, please come forward. Is Camille here? Okay, Camille's gone. Okay, Mr. Wade Jackson, is he gone? Okay, he's gone. Mr. Robert Muhlenweg, please come forward. State your name and address. You have 2 minutes.
My name is Robert Muhlenweg, as it was earlier. I live at 5645 Rio Grande. I don't want to belabor much more of everyone's time. I think having this moratorium is important. I'm glad that you all have amended it to consider extending it to north of Osuna Road. I would encourage you to provide for a long enough period that we could have appropriate and helpful input. And I would also encourage you to consider a new resolution to extend that moratorium to the VC zone. Understand the legalities in not being able to do that tonight, but I think that would be helpful. I don't believe that the moratorium is going to squelch anyone's property rights. I think not doing a moratorium and allowing some of these properties to go forward, unfortunately, will squash property rights, because once something is approved and in place, we're all going to be having to live with that for years and years. Thank you.
Ms. Loretta Chavez Smith, please come forward. State your name and address. You have 2 minutes.
Again, my name is Loretta Chavez Smith. I live at 536 Chavez Road Northwest. I'm going to implore you to please put this moratorium in place. There's one project that I know in the C1 project that has an application in, or put in an application. Put this moratorium so we don't have any more of those. The high density in our C1 was made for our commercial, not 3-story apartment buildings. We need more business, not more apartments. This needs to be extended until the traffic study comes back in. The C1 zoning has ordinances that we need to look at those ordinances and change them for our C1 zoning. Not high-density apartment buildings, better commercial property. And one of these projects that's in the pipeline affects, when they talk about your property being affected, this is not just one property affected, it's a whole community being affected. Please put this moratorium into effect. Thank you, guys. Somebody forgot their pen.
Is there anyone else in the audience? Mel Eves, please come forward, and then I'll get to you, Hank Kelly, and the other person.
Someone forget their pen?
I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. I don't think there's anything wrong with our zoning ordinance. I think what's wrong is the way the Planning and Zoning Commission and the trustees apply it. I will agree that there should be no AC zone, because something I think we can all agree on, we don't want any commercial activities in our residential zones. Forget it, don't do it. We don't want high-density residential in our rural zones. So the problem with Mr. Calvin's application, when he wanted to double the number of events he had, is that Tiffany Justice checked off the list. Okay, yeah, you're doing this, this, and this. She didn't look at the subjective portion of making zoning decisions. You all have, and the Planning and Zoning Commission has, a lot of discretion. And things like rural atmosphere, things like open space, wildlife, things like this. It's in the master plan. It's in the zoning code. You emphasize the right things in writing, and then come along and you do an AC zone in the middle of one of the most expensive residential neighborhoods. We love the vineyards. We hate the events. And finally, through litigation, we were able to prevent him doubling his events. The same thing is here. We love the rural residential atmosphere that we've all helped create. But I don't want to live across the street from a brand new subdivision. It's an average lot size, 0.38 acres, and 4,200 square feet houses. It's not going to bring in young people. It's not going to have, retirees aren't going to be able to afford to live there. It's going to be a subdivision right there on Chavez Road. And I wrote a lot of legal memos.
Mr. Eves, your time is up.
Just use the ordinance you've got.
I understand. Thank you, sir.
To be sensitive about
Yeah.
things that people.
Please come forward, state your name and address. You have 2 minutes.
Hank Kelly, 6900 Rio Grande Boulevard. Two observations. You all have talked in the connection with this moratorium of the rights of existing property owners in the C1 and VC zones to have the right to consistent application of the zoning code. And yet, when we were talking about the property rights of people in the A1 zone affected by the pilot project ordinance, those rights didn't make a damn. Not a damn. Because you were going to approve a 21 lot development within the core A1 zone. That's a bit hypocritical. I agree entirely with Mel Eves that the problem is largely a check the box kind. Montoya talked about his inability to rebuild one unit on his C1 zone. Why couldn't you let him apply for a variance? Your check the box folks wouldn't permit a variance from that 10 unit minimum. That's what this whole process is all about. You wouldn't have half of these complaints if the zoning process were commonsensical in the commercial zone. So why don't you open it up, instruct your people to be commonsensical to the variance processes for owners who want less density? You're not letting them do it. Finally, if you don't apply this moratorium to all C properties, you create the very property that's been a problem that's been alluded to with respect to the cluster housing conservation ordinance. You're treating some property differently than another. You have got to treat everybody the same and apply that thing across the board within C1. I respectfully disagree with Nan Winter. Take a risk, for God's sake, and do the right thing.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
With pleasure. Nancy Nangeroni, 7315 Guadalupe Trail. First, respectfully, Mayor and trustees. First, Trustee Lewis, with respect to notifications given, notifying homeowners associations is discriminatory. A lot of us don't belong to homeowners associations, and so we don't get notified. I never saw any notification about the master planning process. I was never invited to participate in it, and I certainly would have. What would it take? What would it hurt to go beyond 300 feet? I've heard you say 300 feet a few times. Go 600 feet, and we'll all applaud you. And who does that hurt? Nobody. Okay, forgive my tone. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be flip. Trustee Radnovich, the records that I read when I was reading the master plan, where they talked about the meetings that were held, said the average attendance was 25 people, period. And that included the people on the committee. So the average attendance from the village was about 20 people, period. That's what the record says. That's the facts as we have to accept it. There's a hell of a lot more than 20 people here tonight. Trustee Pacheco, I'm sorry, but you give the impression that you're privileging developers. Now, I appreciate developers are people too, they have rights, but you're privileging a few developers over an entire village and the quality of life in this village. And that, I'm sorry, I appreciate, you have a developer husband. When I got to know a police officer and became friends with them, that changed my attitude about police. And I understand how, you may be more sensitive to what's going on with developers, but they're a relatively small number of people compared to your constituents.
Thank you. Your time is up, ma'am. Sorry.
Please don't let yourselves be driven by fear, and a good thing for everybody. I think there's a silver lining in this process.
There will be.
Because look at how the community is turning out. We're getting to know people. Hopefully we come through this as better friends, okay? Thank you.
Please come forward. State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, Patricia Garcia Martinez, 512 Grecian Northwest. I just want to say that as a young person, I learned that if I made a promise, I was supposed to keep that promise. And I am begging each of you to pass this moratorium as long as you can, so you can all get your heads together and change whatever needs to be changed. But I do believe that if you stick with your promise, Dawn, and not go higher than 2 densities, you will have solved half of this problem for all of us already. I told you I knew there was going to be development there on grandfather's property and south, but keep your promise. We teach our children to keep their promises and to tell the truth. It's no big deal. You'll still have the growth. We do need the traffic study and the infrastructure. And like I've said before, don't do things backwards. You have done things backwards. When you're building a home, you get the permit, the foundation, and then you go up. You do have a drawing, but do it the right way. And keep it to two stories. We don't need 39 feet, Dawn. We don't need that. 2 stories would look fine there. And I still say a community center, a swimming pool, give back to us. You've got a big kitty. I don't know what it is today, but you will survive. As time goes on, you will survive. And then another thing on the developer, I contend, get somebody locally that can build something that we like and be very, very proud of. Those pictures are horrible. I just cannot believe that they're on grandfather's property. Please pass the moratorium as long as you can. Get your heads together and change to make it better for all of us for the future, because this plan now is not going to work. Thank you.
Please come forward. State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
My name is Tom Donnellan. I live at 6668 Edgewood Drive, Northwest. I urge you to take the moratorium so that you can recheck into what needs to be done and get an idea, and can be more forthcoming to people that own and want to develop their property as to what is something that's acceptable to the community. Because I think right now what has been set as being acceptable is not acceptable. I think that you should be able to understand. one of the first things I would really encourage you to do, it's a really fairly simple thing in terms of the zoning, is eliminate the minimum number of residential units in commercial. That's not going to take away it's not going to devalue anybody's property. It only means that they don't have to do it. I mean, even you and your husband, Trustee Pacheco, wanted to do a lower density than what you're being forced to do by the village rules. And it would be really, we would love it if you would take that opportunity to go back and go to the 8 units that are 2 stories tall that you originally wanted to build on that site. The other thing that is in there, it's really strange that you have a commercial zoning that allows residential. Because one of the things is that what the village exists on is gross receipts tax, and that comes from commercial businesses. If you convert those units or those land to residential, you no longer get gross receipts tax. The village is shorted on its income. There's nothing in here that's ever been talked about as to what's the mix. What happens if everybody with a commercial turns it into residential and we eliminate the businesses that are here? How is a village going to survive that?
Thank you, Tom. Your time is up.
Thank you.
Please come forward. Is there anyone else? State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
It's David Montoya at 517 Pueblo Solano. I did want to repeat again what Hank said relating to what you talked about, Alan, that those are new. See, I came in and put my application in, and Tiffany said, you can no longer do that. Just put 1 unit. And I go, well, I've had somebody living there for 10 years. He says, well, you can't fix it unless you add 9 units. So I was stuck. And I came through with an architect and I tried to see how it got done. And they pointed out what happened with Sandra. So anyway, I just want to correct that. And it's fairly new, but I don't know exact date. But I'm hoping really that we can get unanimous, because nothing that's in the pipeline is going to be affected by this. And so I'm hoping to get a unanimous support for the moratorium, because I think it gives all of us good faith feel about it. And I think you will see a sea change, and that you'll see that people will cooperate. They want to see building. And if you want to see really the effects, come to my office on 4th Street, right by Ortega, and right across the street, they only built a 2-story. But it took away the tea house. It's a nice place, but it's right on 4th. And it's only 2-story. But we no longer see the Sandia Mountains. So I want you to recognize what an alley will look like all up and down 4th Street, because we can't see it, the mountains anymore.
Thank you. Please come forward. State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Cynthia Sylvester, 333 Willow Road. I think that's a really good point about not seeing the mountains, because the logo that is the logo of Los Ranchos, of course, the centerpiece of that logo is the mountain. Of course, I haven't seen the mountain where I live, just because I know a lot of people don't like them, but they're elm trees that are going to be all cut down along the ditch and behind my house with palindrome. So I'll get to see which, a lot of people don't know about the VC zone because they don't live behind the VC zone. And again, like I said last time, is that for 20 years, we've been living with the VC zone, a long history that also included at one point our side of Willow wanting to be put into the VC zone, the blighting of the area and what how that occurred. I think maybe because of some zoning, but people couldn't develop it. They couldn't change it. And so we ended up with this trailer park that was a disaster. So the one thing I will say is that at least the disaster of the trailer park is gone. You know, they finally cleaned it up, and y'all have owned that for 3 years. But that wasn't exactly what I wanted to say. What I really wanted to say was I really hope that the Pachecos maybe will be allowed to change their plan, that they will be allowed to have a variance. I hope that you put into place this moratorium because, of course, that will hopefully momentarily stop the one at Sandia View or there, because that would be Palindrome, Willow, Sandia View, all right there. It's a canyon. And the whole reason I got involved was because Palindrome wants to do a 55-foot variance.
Your time is up.
And
Thank you.
that should not happen. It's
not
already
going to happen.
48 feet.
It's not going to
Good.
happen. Thank you. Your time is up. Come forward. State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Can you hear me? Sorry. Michelle Smiley, 623 El Paraíso Road Northwest. Mayor, trustees, I'm trying to be brief. I just wanted to come up here to be on the record that I do support the moratorium, and I'm asking you to please support it too. This isn't, the high density is not what the village wants. And I don't want to get the feeling that you are more worried or care more about developers, these 4 developers, than you do about these hundreds of constituents right here in front of you. I want us to come first, not the developers. And I would like to feel that from you. And you talk about being uncomfortable or not comfortable like this high density, that makes me uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable. And I don't want to repeat, be repetitive up here, but we are asking you to do a study. And realistically, if these 4 developments went through, how many people, thousands of people, are you trying to cram into 1/3 of a mile of each other? That's what if you guys have been planning this for years and not one of you thought that was a bad idea to put these 4 enormous developments within 220 feet of each other. And then what's going to happen if we allow this precedent to happen, what's going to happen to the rest of the village? It is going to be overdeveloped and high density, and nothing will be left if we allow this to happen. Thank you.
Please come forward. State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Sandria Cook, 303 Schulte Northwest. One thing I want to say is I would hope that you will all be brave. This is a dynamic process. The reason why you have a city council, the reason why you invite people to come and to talk is so that everyone can discuss, minds can be changed. You can go, oh, I didn't know that. I need to revise my statement. Oh, I need to think about, oh, that isn't right. I didn't know that. I'll change what I'm thinking. That's what we're hoping. All these voices are hoping that you will listen. And I had a request to ask people in the audience right now to raise your hand if you are for the moratorium.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Please come forward. State your name and address for the record. You have 2 minutes. Let's let her come first, Joe, then you sit in here in the front. You have 2 minutes. Oh.
Jennifer Kiefer, 722 Mullen Road. I really wasn't going to speak because my original speech encompassed both moratoriums. But, as one of the newer villagers, August being 4 years here in the village, I really started reflecting on what's the long term. My goal is to be here at least another 30, 40 years, God willing. And my fear is as we start placing high density residential into A1 zones, as we start increasing the density on 4th Street with large businesses. To the gentleman that runs the Lavender Village, and to his point, people look at this as an oasis. And when it starts looking like Albuquerque, New Mexico, and not Los Ranchos, the businesses here are going to suffer. Los Poblanos is not going to become a destination. Why? Because it's going to be surrounded by high density something at some point. We're looking very short-sighted right now. We're looking at 3 to 5 years. I want to see, what are we looking at? And I know everyone's going to say, we have the master plan. Okay. I get so confused with the master plan because it's all hyperbole is what I see in the master plan. It is not action. It is not next steps. It is not long-term. And I support this moratorium. We need to stop the brakes, put a stop for a little while, and just look at this strategically and in the long term with action steps. And Sandra, I just want to say I apologize on behalf of, I think most of us. You did the right thing. Your husband did the right thing and was told that he couldn't do it that way. And you're taking the brunt of it. And for that, I apologize.
Thank you. Please come forward. State your name and address. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor, Trustees. Joe Craig, 505 Calle del Pajarito. 10 years ago, I raised my hand, almost 10 years ago. Attorney Bill Chappell swore me in. I'm one of the planning and zoning commissioners that Nan Winter talked about that worked on this massive village center density with Tim McDonough. I swore an oath. I still consider I'm bound underneath it. We argued, we fought, and agonized over this for a year and a half. We passed one. Tim brought it back to us, said it wasn't enough. We did it again. Joe Brawley and I insisted on having a planner come in because we did not feel comfortable with our expertise. I'm certainly not a planner. We brought in Susan Henderson from Placemakers. She sat there and listened to us talk about density and high density. The village was advocating 5, 6 story. You guys think 3 stories awful. Just think about 5, 6 story. She sat there and listened to us. She said, you have to, if you do this, you don't have enough room. You have to create a parking structure. It then creates too high of rents, and you can't afford this project. They fired her. She was gone. It was the wrong answer. So I want to appeal to you. This is a village of people. I've never seen this much, these many people come out and talk to you. It's not a village of corporations or a village of developers. It's a village of people. And I implore you, please listen to them. Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak? The floor is now closed for comments. I'm going to call for the question. I'm going to call for the roll call vote. Trustee Pacheco.
No.
Trustee Benavides.
Yes.
Trustee Lewis.
Yes.
Trustee Radnovich.
Yes.
The motion carries. We're going to take a 5-minute recess for a bathroom break. Thank you.
I'm glad he's older than me. He calls it bathroom breaks.
Oh, no.
everyone. Yeah, I know.
I want to thank you.
Get involved, yes, please.
Yes, and I found some really good research, and I would just, Nancy and I would love to work with you all and just make it a better village.
I think you guys would add a lot.
Thank you so much, and thank you for doing that.
Hey, we want to say something?
What was the vote? I couldn't hear.
Oh, it was to reapprove the moratorium.
Yeah, I thought you did, but I didn't want to hear
My hearing is bad. Okay, good. I better take my break while I still can. Unfortunately, the mayor is older than me and he calls me racist.
Hello, nice to see you. I give you my time.
He's smart. Well,
And she was trained.
she loved the urban.
Yeah.
The time is 9:05. We are now going to move to item E, discussion and approval of a voting delegate and alternate 2022 New Mexico Municipal League Annual Conference to be held August 31 to September 2nd. Mayor Lopez is the voting delegate. However, I need one other person of any of the governing body who's going to be attending the meeting to be the alternate. I need a motion to approve the 2022 voting delegate and alternate. Who volunteers to be the alternate? If none of the governing body moves, then
Mayor,
I nominate.
I'll also move.
Okay, thank you. And who will be the alternate?
I guess it'll be me.
Thank you. She will be the alternate. I need a second.
I'll second that.
Any discussion from the governing body? Pretty straightforward. Thank you. I'm going to call for the question, call for the roll call vote. Trustee Pacheco?
Yes.
Trustee Benavides?
Yes.
Trustee Lewis?
Yes.
Trustee Radnovich?
Yes.
Great. Item F, pursuant to Section 3-11-6A NMSA 1978, subject to the approval of a majority of all members of the governing body, the mayor shall submit the names of employees to the Board of Trustees for confirmation. I am asking the trustees to defer this until October because the U.S. Air Force has decided not to release the individual in a timely manner. So I need a motion to defer the confirmation of Maritza Smith for the planner position.
I make a motion to defer the confirmation until October.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any discussion from the governing body? Pretty straightforward. I'm going to call for the question, call for the roll call vote. Trustee Pacheco?
Yes.
Trustee Benavides?
Yes.
Trustee Lewis?
Yes.
Trustee Radnovich?
Yes.
Thank you. We now move to trustee informal discussion. Roundtable discussion is informal. Board of Trustees will take no official vote or other action. Trustee Pacheco?
Mayor, I don't have any at this time. Thank you.
Trustee Benavides?
Yeah, just a few things. So at our last meeting, we talked about what's being done with Chavez, and there's money to do planning, which will take some time. We all get that, and then we'll try to find the money to implement the plan. But there was a call to do something now, and I think there might be things that we can do now to help the issue on Chavez. And Chavez is not the only one, so we shall also do something now about El Pueblo and other roads that go, through from 4th Street to Rio Grande Boulevard. Those that are the busiest. Let's talk about it and do something now.
Thank you. Trustee Lewis?
I'm not. Oh, sorry, I wasn't done.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the master plan comes up quite often. And in the master plan, you will see words like high density, affordability, cluster housing. I think there's different ways to interpret what that means, and what we have in our ordinance is one interpretation. So I don't think the master plan is necessarily telling us to do what we've done. Let's see. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Lewis?
I only have one thing, and that is I would want to encourage Administrator Simon, and I'd sure like to meet with the young lady, Catherine Jackson. There's a lot going on, and I don't want to ignore her or overlook the mistletoe issue.
Oh, yeah.
And so I would like to make sure that we set up some kind of meeting her and having a good discussion with her.
Trustee, are you done? Trustee Lewis? Okay. Trustee Radnovich?
I volunteer.
Thank you.
I do have a couple other things.
Sure.
One of our residents, Chuck Lewis, sent me an idea a couple months ago about communicating. And I think we really do suffer from a lack of communication. And I realize that we're doing everything that we're following every path, every parliamentary procedure that we can. But I think we need to do more. And one of his ideas, which is a novel idea, I think, was to put up a LED sign somewhere, maybe on 4th Street, and I'm all for not having junk up, all of our streets, but that it could act as kind of a citizen posting board. And I realize that would be have to be pretty heavily regulated, but it is a place that most of us drive by, and maybe there's a way to hear more from ideas like that. I also want to say that the Paso del Norte open space is really important, especially for the northern part of the village, and it's the only open space that we have as a village. Yes, there's the Bosque, and yes, there's entrances to it at parking lots, and yes, there's Baquequi. But within the village, that is the only property north of Paseo del Norte that we have, and I think we need to treat it as a park, at least partially. So what I mean by that is some of those spaces are just unbelievably beautiful. That grove of cottonwood trees. I mean, I'd want to get married there, or married again there. And so I think we need to do as opposed to, and I'm not saying anything about the fallowing at this point, but I think we need to consider that space as something more than just a field more than something that we just fallow. And I think we need to do a real plan for it. So that's my opinion of that. And I just, let's see. I appreciated that someone at one of our past meetings said the barn is a meeting space. I know it would take a huge amount of money to do something like that, but I think it would be worth considering. Another place that could also act like that is the Agri-Nature Center. It is set up a little bit better. I know the acoustics aren't great in the warehouse portion, and the room in the sort of conference portion is a little bit bigger than this, but not a whole lot. But I think that one of those two spaces could act as a place when we know there's going to be a large crowd at these meetings to go to.
And we're going to go there on the 8th of September and probably the 14th for our next BOT meeting.
Yep, great. Okay, thank you, Mayor. And I want to emphasize one more time that I think that it should be a facilitated discussion in September that we are able to speak at and everyone else is, but with a facilitator. It shouldn't be a closed meeting. And so that's my opinion about that. And that is everything I have to say.
I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I need a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned at 9:13 p.m. Thank you.
I knew I shouldn't have eaten the sandwich on the way home.
I do my best. It's a difficult time, Mel. Thank you very much.
Hi, Tom, I know.
I'm also Bob Markham's roommate.
Oh, Bob's great. He's awesome. He said he wasn't going to do it.